You just touched on you touched on something that is actually, correct me if I'm wrong, a Jewish stereotype. I mean that
I'm New York Jewish.
okay that you know that okay whatever gruff or blunt, uncivil. There's books on by Cudahy.
Let me tell you what it's like. New York Jews have a reputation for being outspoken. I am a New York Jew. The East European Jews are much more open and direct than the German Jews, who are much more circumspect. I have an advantage over most other people in this world. My father thought that there were two opinions, his and the wrong one. My father did not care what anybody thought about anything. He only cared about what he thought. He never said, look at the people down the street. He didn't give a shit about the people down the street. He had his values. Now, it's true, he was a little eccentric, he was not circumspect, people made fun of him, and sometimes he was wrong despite his opinion. But both my sister and I, and let me tell you, I'm a wallflower compared to my sister. We say what we think. We don't censor ourselves. And it's the process of socialization. It's part family, it's part culture. Most American children are socialized to behave, to respect their elders, to have good manners. Good manners in this country is so important. Growing up in the Bronx, good manners must have been about 27th on the list of virtues. In child rearing, a Gentile child misbehaves and is sassy about it, who got twice the punishment for being a sassy kid. A Jewish child who misbehaves, but who's clever about getting out of it, will be praised for his cleverness rather than punished for the misdemeanor. So what do the boys learn? What do the girls learn? The cleverer I am, the more I will be appreciated in my family and in my culture. So Jewish boys, especially boys, girls too, I mean, like Barbra Streisand is not your typical dumb blonde actress. Something's on her mind, it's on her tongue. She's from Brooklyn. Growing up in New York, maybe some Gentiles have this in New York also, and don't even realize it's New York, but what's on your mind is on your tongue. That is not American. American, going along, having good manners, not making a fuss. I don't know if you remember Bella Abzug. She was a New York congresswoman. No one would ever mistake her for a woman from Iowa. Never. So you have to understand the culture.
Now, are we talking about quote Jewish cultural traits here in your view? Are this imported from like Eastern Europe or what?
Yeah, we're talking about, yeah. This is imported from Eastern Europe. And this is an assertiveness. It's part of the Eastern European culture. Part of the Eastern European culture is be careful of the Gentiles, don't upset them. Can't be the same thing. You can't be outspoken and afraid of what the Gentiles will think. It's an aspect of the culture. You know, you think about how many of the 20th century American comedians were Jewish. They spoke in an idiom that, coming from the Bronx, I understood perfectly. Someone like Will Rogers or Johnny Carson, they came from different sections of the country. They spoke in an idiom that other parts of the culture thought were hysterical. Because they reflected where they came from. Now, I consider Scandinavian humor as being an oxymoron. You know, it just doesn't make sense. Or, who's this guy, Lake Wobegon? He has a show every week. Yes, you do. Everybody's heard of him. Anyway.
Jared something.
Yeah, he
I
comes.
know what you're talking about. Yeah, the PBS or the NPR guy. Okay,
Yeah, and where all the kids are above average.
Okay.
When I came to Tucson, and I was talking with a contemporary, a woman, and she said her kids were average, just B students. I had never heard of a Jewish mother who said her kids was average. Never. I mean, you might have somebody with Down syndrome or some other problem, but otherwise, oh, they're so smart. He's 12 years old and he says hello when he meets people. Isn't that a genius? That's another thing for Jewish self-confidence and accomplishment, is they are made to feel so good about themselves. A Jewish prince, even if there's no basis for it, they are made to feel very good. They're made to feel uncomfortable for other reasons. Like in the Christian community, I find very few people have guilt. Maybe the Catholics always have guilt. They're guilty for being born. But among the Midwestern Protestants, they don't feel guilty. They do something wrong, they're punished, it's over. They don't think about it. Jews carry it for the rest of their lives.
Guilt. What about, you talked about this in your book, and the book is not yesterday, it's like 20 years ago, but you talked about Jewish achievement, and 30% of the prominent universities had Jewish professors, or 30% had. Could you discuss all that?
Yeah, Nathan Glazer had an article on that. In the Jewish culture, intellectual achievement, cultural achievement is very, very important. So you are born into a culture where you absorb the values of the culture. You know that intellectual achievement is important. I don't know a single Jewish person who was told to be on the football team, or whose parents weren't frightened if they were on the football team that they would get hurt. There is no prestige for physical accomplishment. Maybe in Israel now, you're on the Olympic teams and stuff. But there was tremendous sense of prestige for academic accomplishment, for financial, for professional accomplishment. Like my father used to say to me, if I wasn't doing well in school, or if I didn't show sufficient interest in academics, he said, what do you want to do? Grow up to be a truck driver? So a truck driver was sort of such a dismissal. Who wants to be a truck driver? Some cultures, you want to be a truck driver, that's okay. It's a respectable profession. You make a certain amount of money. It's an honest day's work. You don't want to be a truck driver. So kids learn from the earliest consciousness, even before they're conscious, that they are going to do something with their minds. There's a New York Jewish joke. How are your grandchildren? Oh, and then the woman points to 2 kids, 5 and 7. Brian, the lawyer, is over there. But Jacob, who's going to be a doctor, he's on that side. You already know what professions have been picked out for you. Now, academic professions have not been picked out for you. But within the Yiddish culture, the scholar has the highest prestige. The people who study the Torah. Now, I think the people who study Torah bunch of fucking idiots sitting there and reading the Torah all day long. But in the culture, that has the highest prestige. So of course you're going to get a disproportionate number of academics and intellectuals and professionals, because these kids have been programmed for that. You know, the idea that the kids should be happy. Yeah, I want the kids to be happy. But this is how they're going to be happy, by doing what I want them to do.
Do you know any Jewish jokes? I'm sure you know a lot, but about Jewish smarts in relation to non-Jews or anything like that? Are there any that
Yeah, the guy is shikup.
Is there a joke about it? Could you discuss it?
That itself, the Jews are smarter than the Gentiles. A Yiddish shikup, a Jewish head, that's high praise. When the little 4-year-old makes some witticism, mother says, a Yiddish shikup. Smart Jew. Yeah, everybody knows, within the culture, knows what that means.
I've heard, what is a shanda for the goyim?
Oh, a shanda for the goyim. It's a shanda. Hey, that's what will the goyim think. A shanda means shame. A shanda for the goyim means, what will the goyim think? We don't want to be embarrassed in front of the Christians. So if you get a Jewish embezzler, or when Kennedy was assassinated, and many Jews said, I hope it's not a Jew who shot him. Because it would have been a shanda for the goyim. It would have been embarrassment, it would have been a shame, it would have been much more than an embarrassment or shame. So many Jews are worried that Jewish activity would cause anti-Semitism. Jewish activity doesn't cause anti-Semitism, but it might intensify anti-Semitism. A shanda for the goyim, that's what will the goyim think.
Could you, along these lines, there's a lot of books out and stuff now about, and conversation with even people I spoke to about Jewish prominence in politics, in the media, all these things. How does that fuel anti-Semitism? Or what are the issues to that in your view?
How does it fuel? I don't think it fuels anti-Semitism. If you're basically anti-Semitic, then you might not like it. Most people don't even know the difference. Wisconsin had 2 Jewish senators for 12 years. Obviously, Wisconsin's not a Jewish state, and being Jewish didn't hurt the 2 people at all. I don't think most voters pay attention to that anymore. They used to, but they don't. Having an ethnic name used to be a double-edged sword. In a community with that ethnic person, it's a good thing to have an ethnic name. In a community that's bigoted, it's not good to have that name. Now, a lot of people think that the opposition to Obama is because he's black. Now, I haven't heard anybody say that I don't like the black man in the White House. But is opposition to Obama because he's black? I have no idea. But if you think it, who can disprove you? I remember seeing one anecdote, which the woman said, I don't mind having a black president, but those little pickaninnies in the White House? It's the only thing I ever saw. Excuse me. How many people think that? I don't know. A lot of Jews are self-conscious about Jews being prominent because they think it will intensify anti-Semitism if the Jewish person does something wrong. I don't think it makes a difference anymore. If you're a bigot, you're a bigot. If you're not a bigot, you're not a bigot. You know, um, I don't think anybody was for or against Gabby Giffords because her grandfather, one grandfather was Jewish, and then she suddenly, as an adult, decides to become Jewish, and she joins Jewish organizations. So now she's called Jewish. One parent was Jewish, one grandparent was Jewish, one parent was not Jewish. Whatever she wants to call herself, let her call. She wants to call herself an Indian, she can call herself an Indian. I have to go get some water. Excuse me. You don't want anything?
No, I'm fine. I'm not in your work. And there's an intriguing thing about it to me, the Jewish American princess joke. And it's but the point that you make it, and I heard that before, is it originates among Jewish men.
Yeah.
Could you discuss the paradox and how that's anti-Semitism, how it comes from within the community? What's that about?
Within the community, people can say things that members outside of the community can never say. So that black people sometimes call other black people nigger. If you, as a non-black person, calls a black person a nigger, that's a terrible thing. Absolutely terrible. Among the Jews, some young women who wore flashy jewelry or expensive clothing or spent a lot of money on makeup, you know, the Jewish guys call them Japs, Jewish American princess. When the Jewish guys do it, it's a joke. If a non-Jew does it, it is not a joke. This was an issue in the 80s. The ADL brings it up, makes it a national issue. It's an issue of prejudice. It's a fad that had no meaning. I didn't think it had meaning then, has certainly no meaning now. It's something that's an issue of the day, issue du jour, that passes quickly. So for a few years it was an issue. It was of no consequence, but people got hysterical about it, just like the opposition to Israel's position on the Arabs. There are some colleges where the opposition is strong. There are, people call that anti-Semitism. I don't think it's anti-Semitism. There are many Jews who are opposed to Israeli issues. Like my daughter says, and she's extremely opposed to the policies of Israel toward the Arabs, she says she likes going to synagogue, but she won't go because people talk about Israel all the time, and that's not why she would go. She's not anti-Semitic. She is very critical of Israeli policies.
How much is modern Israel part of the synagogue life today?
Here comes my wife. Israel is very much a part of the synagogue. Very much. Most synagogues are totally supportive of Israel. Most Hillel organizations on campus are totally supportive of Israel. Just the way it is.
So would it be fair to say that mainstream Jewry, whatever that means?
Mainstream Jewry is strongly supportive of Israel. No question about that. Some Jews don't like the policies of Israel, but they will not come out and say anything in public. Some Jews will come out and say, make mild criticism. Have you ever heard of J Street? J Street is a group of Jews who are more critical of Israeli policies. They're not anti-Semitic, but they are critical of Jewish policies.
Could you just, again, in terms of anti-Semitism again, this has come up before. For those individuals, talk about generalizations. When anybody says, quote, the Jews, you're in trouble in terms of critique. But how, could you sort this out for me? When is anti-Semitism anti-Semitism? When is it something, big?
I think that was.
When is it actually critical of some aspect of the Jewish community, be it Israel or otherwise? Where do you sort this out?
I told you, if you're hostile to Jews because you don't like Jews, you're anti-Semitic. If you're hostile to a position taken by Jewish organizations, you're not necessarily anti-Semitic, you just disagree.
What's your perspective on Muslims in America or in Europe in anti-Semitism?
Hi.
Oh, hi. I didn't want to interrupt.
In Europe,
Start that, okay.
okay. Muslims in Europe are quite different from Muslims in the United States. It seems to me from what I read in the newspapers, and you have to be very careful about learning anything from what you read in the newspapers, that the Muslims in Europe are more anti-Semitic. The Muslims in the United States, they're like everybody else. Most of them mind their own business, pay attention to their daily lives. They may have feelings about what's going on in the Middle East. They belong to organizations. To a certain extent, they must share the Palestinians' feelings, but I don't know. They're not anybody I worry about. It's like Armenians or Italians or the Irish or anybody in the United States. A lot of people have attachment to their homelands. A lot of people have attachment to their ancestors' way of life or their relatives' way of life. I would not isolate the Muslims in the United States for any reason. That there were some college students who were outspoken. There are always college students who are outspoken.
This is a quote from one of your books. Say, a good deal of the writing by Jews about themselves has been steeped in filial pietism, it's a new word to me, and provincial pride. Could you discuss that? Do you recall saying that?
I don't, but read it again to me, please.
A good deal of writing by Jews about themselves has been steeped in filial pietism.
Filial pietism, oh yeah.
And provincial
How good the Jews are, how many Jews were in this activity, how many Jews were in that activity, how many Jews fought in the war, how many Jews contributed to war effort. They want to show how good the Jews are. I find that feeling abhorrent. You are a worthwhile person because you're a worthwhile person. You are not a better person because you fought in the service. Most people who fight in the service are drafted. And the people who are not drafted now, as you can see, the volunteer army is mostly lower economic group people who find this is a way of getting ahead. Except for the South, where being in the military used to be very prestigious. Like among the Irish Catholics, having a son who was a priest was very prestigious. I don't think it's very prestigious anymore. You can't get anybody to become a priest. But Jews take this to show that they're loyal Americans. They don't have to prove that they're loyal Americans. Jews are people, they're Jews. They have values, they have things they like, things they don't like. Individuals are individuals. I would not want my son fighting in the army.
This is another quote, this is very interesting too. You say, in just a few short years, Adolf Hitler's maniacal scheme to rid Europe of its Jews accomplished what no Jew since Moses had done, practically unified world Jewry in a rallying to a common cause. So my question sort of is, and I've heard this before from different, is the threat of anti-Semitism, or has it been an essential glue to keep a very disparate Jewish community together, whether they're Orthodox or secular? Could you discuss that?
Yeah. Before World War II, 1939, 5% of American Jews were Zionists. In other words, they wanted a Jewish state in Palestine. 1945, 85% of American Jews were Zionists. They wanted a Jewish state in Palestine. The Holocaust had made so many Jews more conscious of the fact of being Jewish and that there should be a Jewish state. That's how he unified the Jews. Not every Jew is concerned about anti-Semitism. I know many Jews who are not concerned about anti-Semitism. I'm not concerned about anti-Semitism. I don't feel this is an anti-Semitic country. That some people are anti-Semitism, some people are anti-Semites. Doesn't touch me. Doesn't touch me in any way. When I came to the University of Arizona history department, I was the first Jew to get tenure in the history department there. I had a colleague who spoke of your kind of people. So, it didn't trouble me. He was a bigot.
Could I ask you, you mentioned in your book the authoritarian personality, you cite that and talk about it a little bit by Theodor Adorno. Do you recall, can you summarize the thrust of that and what that whole, I guess a lot of the Jewish defense agencies you discussed that.
After World War II, the American Jewish Committee did a study. What causes anti-Semitism? One of the first books to come out was a book by Theodor Adorno in 1949. He and several other authors, which they call the authoritarian personality. In essence, it said, those people who are not thinking, who respect authority, who look up to those who are more important, who are not democratic, are likely to be anti-Semitic. It was not until the fifth book in the series that religion is even mentioned. Many Jews and Jewish organizations did not want to say that anti-Semitism came from Christian teachings. Let me show you something. Books came out, articles came out. Being anti-Semitic is being anti-urban, or being anti-Semitic is being anti-economic royalist, or being anti-Semitic. There were all kinds of articles saying that people are anti-Semitic for different reasons. No one mentions religion. I think I'm probably the first who makes a big deal about anti-Semitism being Christian teachings. The first who does it in the United States. In Europe, it's done way before me. I mean, it's quite obvious. Everybody knows it there in Europe. But in the United States, Jews have been reluctant to do that. The authoritarian personality. They want to make anti-Semitism everything that it's not, because the Jewish organizations did not want to come out and say the Christians are bigots. They knew the Christians were bigots. They knew religion was a major factor. They didn't want to articulate it. I did it because that's what I found. And you cannot be an historian and in PR at the same time. You know, you're one or you're the other. I'm not one to spin. I was not the least bit self-conscious pointing out that anti-Semitism has its roots in Christian teaching. This is what I found. This is what I could document. Why call it something else? I don't care what the goyim may think. That's like a shanda for the goyim, or what the goyim will think. I don't care. As I said, I can make mistakes as an historian. I can make honest mistakes. But not for the wrong reasons, not because I care what other people think, because I don't.
Could you maybe have a brief overview, perhaps? I mean, this is it could be an enormous question, but just to sort of summarize some of the most famous American and influential anti-Semites. Some come to my mind. You talked about a number of them.
Father Coughlin, Louis Farrakhan. You can't get, this guy who in the black community in the 1930s, there were several ministers. In fact, you can look them up in the book, Windwright, I forget their names, but before then, anti-Semitism is not as prominent a feeling or having leaders until the 20th century, really. Anti-Catholicism is much more prevalent in the 18th century and the 19th century. I mean, the prime religious prejudice in the United States and in British colonies was anti-Catholicism. Until the late 19th century, even into the early 20th century, Protestants were much more anti-Catholic, and there were more anti-Catholic organizations. I think the first anti-Semitic organization was in the 1930s. I would be hard-pressed to think of any anti-Semitic organization that was anti-Semitic. Like even the Ku Klux Klan in the 1920s. Universally anti-Catholic. Anti-Semitic in some parts of the country, but not other parts of the country. Anti-Asian in some parts of the country, but not other parts of the country. Anti-Catholicism in all parts of the country. Even though the Ku Klux Klan, which starts in the second Klan, the first Klan is in the 1860s, but the second Klan, which starts in 1915 and is prominent in the 1920s, is primarily anti-Catholic.
I had read somewhere there were some prominent Jews in the Ku Klux Klan early on, or something. Do you know about that?
There were Jews in the Klan. Yeah. In Illinois in the 1920s, the Klan gives some Jewish businessman a big party, and they celebrate him because he's been such a good American in the community for so long. There may have been Jews in the Klan. In the South, it is difficult in the South. Maybe in Texas, but outside of Texas, the Klan is not particularly anti-Semitic. But in the South, anybody who's not Protestant was looked upon suspiciously. It was not specifically anti-Semitism, certainly more anti-Catholicism, and Jews, they couldn't understand why they didn't accept Jesus in their heart. Rather than they were hostile to Jews, they were just outsiders. But for the Klan, it depends on the section of the country in which you were in. In the Northeast, very anti-Semitic. In the West, anti-Semitic but anti-Asian. But it's not until the 1930s that you get anti-Semitic organizations.
Okay, and those would be like what? What were the most?
Knights of the White Camellia. If you look at my anti-Semitism book on the 1930s chapters, you'll find them all listed.
Okay. What about, did you discuss, in the book you discussed black and Jewish disagreement over affirmative action? That's interesting.
Yeah.
Discuss what's going on there.
Blacks feel or have felt that they have been discriminated for so long that extra effort should be made to hire them, even if they're not as qualified as whites. Jews felt they had been victimized by discrimination and wanted equal opportunity. Jews are among the best educated people in the United States. They're among the most accomplished intellectually. They felt that if you have affirmative action, qualified Jewish people would lose out. Qualified other white people would lose out because you're hiring somebody who is less qualified. Blacks argue that you discriminated against us for so long, you have to give us a chance to catch up. It's a very difficult issue. It was a big deal in the 70s and 80s. People have strong feelings about it. I'm of mixed minds. I really am. I can't take a public stand because I don't have a private stand. Both sides are correct.
Okay. You stated something pretty interesting. There's a lot of interesting things, of course, but you say the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948 gave many Jews renewed pride. Perhaps so self-confidence and subsequently their bearing may have, in some intangible ways, changed their behavior and reaction of non-Jews toward them. Could you discuss that aspect of pride or something ennobling about the State of Israel?
The Jews beat all these Arabs. They were overwhelmed. One of the articulated prejudices against Jews in the past, even in the present, I don't know, is that Jews don't fight. So Jews winning something militarily, in the Jewish minds, they thought the Gentiles would respect them more because they won military victories. In other words, they accomplished something that was important in the Gentile culture, and they wanted to show the Gentiles they could be militarily superior also. They won. It's like in any sports contest, should Green Bay feel superior to people from Pittsburgh?
Could you discuss the impact of the Holocaust on modern Jewish identity? That's a big question.
That's a very hard question. Many people, many Jewish people think of the Holocaust. And they've been victimized. They never want to be victimized again. They want to make heroes of those who were victimized. We're getting into a complex issue that it's hard for me to articulate because I'm not as comfortable expressing strong viewpoints on feelings rather than facts. Some feelings I know very well, so I can articulate what I think they are. But some feelings are sort of in the air among some people, but you can't really define them. I'm not the person to speak to about the impact of the Holocaust on American Jewish identity. There are other people who are probably much better versed on that subject. Have you spoken to Steven Zipperstein yet?
No, I haven't heard him.
You haven't?
No, I don't know him.
He teaches at Stanford. He's very, very
Where's he?
smart. Stanford.
Stanford. Okay, I'm going caps.
His name is Zipperstein.
Got it.
You've spoken to this guy in Michigan. Again, I forget names.
Volkowski?
No.
Gittelman. Zvi Gittelman?
Zvi Gittel.
I spoke with him.
He would be able to
Okay.
explain that
The
better.
interesting thing though is you're not as connected to it emotionally then. Is that what I'm hearing? And basically, I've spoken to some people who just gush to me about their feelings about the Holocaust and But your attitude is more distant from it. Is that
Yeah,
okay? So
my
that's a big
attitude.
deal to you, or in terms of your own connection to it.
I don't have any emotional connection to it. The only, when I was 5 years old, in 1939, I came home from school one day. My mother said, when we were living in Brooklyn, we had to go to the Bronx because Hitler killed all of grandma's brothers and sisters. I was 5 years old. Later on, I came to realize it's the beginning of September 1939. This is when World War II begins. Hitler invades Poland. My grandmother's brothers and sisters lived in Poland. So of course they would be attacked. Now, as it turned out, my grandfather had no relatives that I knew of in Europe. My grandmother had sisters and brothers. They were all killed. But I never knew them. I never met them. My grandmother had left Europe in 1902 and had never been back. So how close could she be to her brothers and sisters 40 years later? So that was my only connection. There are many people in the United States, many Jews, they have relatives who were killed in the Holocaust. They have relatives in Israel. Their feelings are different. I mean, I'm Jewish, and I'm proud to be Jewish, and I would never deny that I'm Jewish. And as soon as I open my mouth, you can tell that I'm Jewish. But I don't feel that parochial that I should care only about, or particularly about Jewish people. I suppose I have some sense of that. That's the Holocaust was an historical event that was a terrible tragedy that should not have happened. Same thing is true with Genghis Khan killing all those Chinese people. You know, over 2 million Chinese were killed during World War II. The Japanese slaughtered something like 300,000 Chinese in Nanking in 1937. I think I feel about the same of the Japanese slaughter of the Chinese as I do about the German slaughter of the Jews. Terrible tragedies. They should have not happened. I don't lose any sleep over it. I don't think one tragedy is more significant or more important than another tragedy. A tragedy is a tragedy. And just because some people were Jewish and some people were Asian, I mean, I read a book recently about the British treatment of the Africans in Kenya. It was horrible, absolutely horrible. I felt very badly while reading that book. Very, very badly. How many people know about the treatment of the British treatment of the Africans in Kenya? Or worry about it, or build memorials? They were people. I don't have that kind of emotional attachment, even though I have a very strong emotional attachment to Jews and to being Jewish. But my feelings are complex because I don't like the behavior of most organized Jews. I don't like their parochialism. I like their charitable activities. I like people individually. I'm more comfortable with a certain kind of Jew from New York. But then again, I went to a doctor recently who's Indian, but he's from New Jersey. I felt very comfortable with him. He had a New York sense of humor. I really felt, this is a guy I can relate to. His family was from India. He's Indian, but he was raised in New Jersey. So there was a lot of cultural similarities.
Well, this is interesting to me because you're unusual in terms of especially people your age, Jewish individuals. There's a sense that there has to be kind of a homage paid to the Holocaust victims, and there's something really exceptional about the issue of the Holocaust is unique, and it's really,
It is unique.
Could you discuss that? Is that your view? there's controversy about even that.
What, whether it's unique or not?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, nobody ever rounded up 6 million Jews before and put them in ovens. Does it make a difference that they were put in ovens rather than the Chinese in Nanking being slaughtered with machetes? Is there a better way to kill people or a worse way to kill people? I'm opposed to killing. The British tortured the Africans. Just the whole sense of imperialism that European nations went to Africa and Asia, and while they didn't enslave, sometimes they did enslave the so-called natives. You can't say natives, it's a bad word now. But I'm a native of the United States. Um, people are comfortable with different things. Much more was made about the Holocaust 20 years after it happened than was made about it in the 40s and 50s. So it's the times. It's what everybody else thinks. You know, people are very influenced by what their peer group thinks. And people are very influenced by what the community thinks is important. I spoke in the South many times, but I was at a conference in Atlanta once, and we were talking about slavery. And I said, if my ancestors owned slaves, I would be humiliated, and I certainly wouldn't tell anybody about it. I wouldn't be proud of that. People hear it. And in the South especially, you don't say anything that is not socially acceptable. You turn your back, they'll stick a knife in it. But you do not say anything publicly that everybody doesn't agree with.
What about this? Farrakhan did a book on Jews and slave owners, and it's controversial. Do you have any knowledge about that historically?
Farrakhan, there may have been, of course there were Jews who owned slaves. Did Jews start slavery? No. I have a friend who's knowledgeable. In fact, he's the world's expert on abolitionism. And he said there were maybe a few Jews in the slave trade, but it was of no significance. But so what? What if there were a lot of Jews in the slave trade? There were people in the slave trade. Everybody who was in the slave trade should not have been in the slave trade. There were Frenchmen, there were English people, there were Dutch people. You know.
What about Jews in the left? This, in terms of anti-Semitism, communism, socialism, activism in this country. I interviewed Al Haber, who co-founded SDS. Are you familiar with that? In Ann Arbor. But what about the issue of this has been a common anti-Semitic canard?
Jews, East European Jews, were heavily into socialism. Many of them, not all of them, but many of them. The Jewish faith emphasizes empathy and assisting those who are less fortunate. Earlier in this conversation, I spoke of tzedakah, that Jews should help those who are less fortunate. There were many Jews who were socialists. There were many Jews who were communists. I mean, you have to recreate the 1930s or Europe at the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century to see how people were living in such poverty and other people were living in such luxury. And many Jews, their consciences were touched. Socialism promised a better life for most people. Communism promised a better life for most people. Many Jews were involved. Communism became a dirty word in the United States after World War II. Before World War II, it wasn't such a dirty word. Is there something wrong that everybody should have a job, everybody should have a decent place to live? Is there anything wrong with that ideology? You read Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto. He lists 10 points that every country should have. Labor unions. We have labor unions. Universal education. Who's opposed to universal education? That used to be a communist goal. Now it's everybody's goal. Whether they believe it or not, whether they will support it or not. I don't remember all 10 points, but I used to, it's only 21 pages, the Communist Manifesto, but I used to Xerox the page of the 10 recommendations and give it out to my classes and say, read this, which of these could you support, which you don't support. And generally, the students supported about 5 of the 10 points. And then I'd say, do you know where this comes from? They had no idea. Now, if I had told them this is part of the Communist Manifesto, they would have had a negative reaction before they started. But not knowing where it came from, they could read each point by itself. Now, if you're anti-labor, you're anti-labor. But if you do believe in labor unions, and I was brought up believing in labor unions, even though labor unions are excessive. Look, recently, I think it was Shell Oil, they made $1 trillion profit in the last year. They make, I don't know how many millions of dollars profit every hour. And here we're talking about cutting heating for the poor people? If that defines communism, I'm a communist. I do believe in taking from the rich and giving to the poor. Don't take everything from the rich. Everybody should live decently. But I think it's obscene, the profits that the oil companies have made. The recent recession that occurred from 2007 to 2009, everybody's been told they have to do belt tightening. Most people in the country have been hurt by it. Who hasn't been hurt? The people who caused it. The bankers are doing very well. The Wall Street brokers are doing very well. When you look at the new budgets that are being proposed, they're not being asked to contribute more. We passed a tax law December, extending the taxes for tax cuts for people who are making over $250,000 a year. That's obscene. Given the problems in this country, given the financial needs of the country, do you think someone making $40 million a year is going to change his lifestyle by paying an extra $10,000 or $1 million in taxes? You think he's going to have to tighten his belt? I know some guy, he was so upset, in the recession, he went down from 80 million to 47 million. He didn't have to change his lifestyle, but he was miserable. Almost, over $30 million. And he only had $47 million. Right there, it gets me.
May I ask you, jumping back a little bit, in the Jewish history and religious history, there's a long victimization tradition. Right? Haman and Queen Esther and Amalek and all these things. How much does that inform Jewish identity and the issue of anti-Semitism? I guess the question sort of is there an anti-Semitism actually in Jewish tradition? It's going way back to day one.
They're afraid of the Christians. The Christians have always been harsh to them.
But even before that, in the Torah, there's Queen Haman wasn't a Christian, right?
Wait a second. Let's say 100 tribes are living next to one another. And one tribe says, we're the best tribe. God chose us. We're the chosen people. You people are nowhere near as good as we are. How do you think those people, other people, are going to react? If you have any religion, the Catholic Church says it has the true faith. The Jews are God's chosen people. The Puritans in England believed that they were the only ones who saw the light. What religion teaches we're the fourth best religion? Most groups feel that they're pretty good. And so if they're the best, then everybody else in comparison is not as good as. I've done some work in Southern Jewish history. Many Southern Christians said to their Jewish friends, "You're not going to go to heaven if you don't take Jesus into your heart." They were very sincere. The Jews were not Christians. They wouldn't go to heaven. How could the Jews be so obdurate and not to accept the truth of Christianity? I don't know about ancient Jewish history. I'm not the one to ask about it. I'll tell you, I don't know who you've interviewed aside from Tzvi Gittelman, but Tzvi Gittelman is so smart and so knowledgeable. I mean, you're not going to find too many people who are as good as he is.
Do you know him personally?
A little bit. We've been on conferences together. Steve Zipperstein is very smart. Now, if you speak to Jonathan Sarna, who is also very, very bright, you will get the Jewish public relations point of view. Have you spoken with Jonathan Sarna?
No, I'm aware of him. He's a guy I want to look up.
He will give you the public relations point of view. He's very, very smart. He's a religious Jew. He's very much part of the Jewish in-group, organizationally and religiously. And he will tell you the information the Jews want to disseminate.
Oh, so you think he's a propagandist or something, or what do you mean?
I wouldn't put it that way. He's extraordinarily articulate. He's extraordinarily intelligent. But he will tell you things in a way that will not be offensive to anybody. Much more, he might say the same things I say, but in a much more circumspect fashion.
What about Jews in Hollywood?
What about him?
The issue of anti-Semitism, the issue of prominence there, and how that fueled anti-Semitism in the early years. And you talk about a movie about a couple movies that were done about anti-Semitism. Can you discuss?
Gentleman's Agreement is probably the most famous.
Can you discuss that?
It was based on Laura Hobson's book, Gentleman's Agreement. She found that what she found, and she's speaking more about Protestants than Catholics here, the genteel anti-Semitism that was not so much throwing stones as, well, I don't think they'd be comfortable with us. I would rather not spend my time with them. It's the Darien, Connecticut kind of anti-Semitism. The New England, I mean, not the immigrants. The immigrants bring the Irish, the Italians, they all bring over the European prejudices. But the WASPs, the Boston Brahmins, the people who are the real Americans, here's my FedEx package. They are the ones who are very concerned about, I mean, they're anti-Semitic, but they're very politely, so they would not throw bricks.
What about Hollywood? How is Hollywood?
Hollywood, some people are anti-Semitic. It's like any place else, except Hollywood's very prominent, and everybody in Hollywood is prominent. So everything they do is prominent.
Was there anti-Semitism about a lot of the founders apparently were Jewish immigrants from?
Sure, there's anti-Semitism by people who are not Jewish. They were the employers. How do employees feel about the employers? Especially when there were no unions. I have to go sign for this package now.
About Henry Ford and how his anti-Semitism and how it was eventually stopped.
It was eventually stopped because somebody sued him and he didn't want to go to court. So they signed an agreement, and part of the agreement was he would stop disseminating information about anti-Semitism.
Could you discuss briefly his influence in terms of anti-Semitism?
I don't think he had any influence.
No.
No.
I thought he had
Who?
a magazine.
The Dearborn Independent, 91 consecutive issues with articles hostile to Jews. You have influence if you take people's opinions and you change them. If you say what everybody believes, what kind of influence do you have? He was anti-Semitic. Country was anti-Semitic. So, did it make them more anti-Semitic? How many people read the Dearborn Independent? How many people changed their views because of the Dearborn Independent? Henry Ford's Dearborn Independent and his outspoken anti-Semitism was noted because he was so prominent. Rarely does such a prominent person express views so strongly. But aside from the Jews, who paid attention to what he was saying? You ask anybody today, what did Henry Ford do? They'll tell you he made cars. What else do they know about him? Most non-Jews since the 1920s would not even be aware that Henry Ford conducted an anti-Semitic campaign. Jews would be aware of it. Non-Jews passes them by. It's just not an issue.
What about Father Coughlin?
Father Coughlin was very important. But he was important because, again, he intensified what people thought. And he had something like 15 million listeners to his radio show. He was important from 1937, from November 37 until the beginning of World War II, mostly among Catholics, although Protestants listened to him as well. And at the beginning of World War II, the president contacted his cardinal and said, "You shut that man up or we're putting him in jail for sedition." He was shut up. After April 42, you don't hear from Coughlin anymore, because the cardinal, whoever the cardinal was in the Midwest at the time, called him in and said, either you resign as a priest, or if you want to stay as a priest, you stop being political. He stopped being political. So it's from 37 to 42, and he has a tremendous amount of followers. But he just intensified he helped intensify people's feelings. He didn't take non-anti-Semites and make them anti-Semitic. But he was very, very well known and he was much more influential than Ford because people actually listened to him on the radio. How many people read the Deerfield Independent? It was a local newspaper. And it was given away free in the Ford dealerships. Coughlin, he was on the radio. Radio was a big thing in the 1930s. And you have national, it's like the internet now. Everybody can pick things up on the internet. Then everybody could listen to the radio. When Ford was spewing forth all this stuff, there was no radio. I think radio comes into vogue in the 1920s. But Henry Ford never goes on the radio. Coughlin is on the radio. Receives a tremendous amount of attention. Also, while Ford didn't have any organized support, Coughlin had a lot of organized support in the Catholic Church. They used to sell his publications right outside of church on Sunday. Most Catholic publications supported what he said. There were a few that didn't. Commonweal did not. But Commonweal was considered left-wing.
In essence, what did he say about the Jewish community?
That the Jews were leading us into war, that the Jews were communists, that the Jews caused the Depression, and that Hitler was doing the right thing with the Jews.
He said that? It's,
Yeah, he said that. That Hitler had to do that. First of all, in the 1930s, all Hitler did with the Jews was have laws segregating them and preventing them from engaging in certain activities in Germany. These laws don't really come into prominence until 34, 35. There's a big pogrom in November of 37. Most people are not focusing on the Jews. I mean, the Kristallnacht, which is November 9th, 10th, 19th, I'm pretty sure it's 37. At the time, it's like what's happening in Egypt in the past 2 weeks. Everybody knows about it. How many people are going to remember what happened in Egypt this week? Maybe next year they'll know the government changed, but that'll be the most of it.
you quote Jacob Neusman, who I actually interviewed, who said in 1973, so this might be dated, but I'd like your feedback. You quote Neusman, who said, "To be a Jew in America is to be in some measure different, alien, a minority." Could you address that?
Yeah, most Jews thought that. A lot of Jews think that today. A lot of the Jew defensive organizations are because they think they're outsiders. Jews are outsiders, they're not Christians. This is a Christian country. We don't have any anti-Protestant defamation league, do we? I don't even think we have an anti-Catholic defamation league. I think you have an Italian-American civil rights group. Certainly not an Irish or a German one.
This has been a classical anti-Semitic canard that Jews don't assimilate. That came up before. Could you discuss that?
Of course not. You don't have to get a scholar. If you don't want to marry someone who's not Jewish, you don't want to assimilate. Assimilation means one thing, intermarriage. Acculturation is taking on aspects of the culture. You root for a football team, you have Thanksgiving dinner. Assimilation means you blend in. If you wish to remain distinct, you are not assimilating. Jews who only want to marry other Jews, whose children should only marry other Jews, of course don't want to assimilate. That doesn't take, much thought. Mexicans who will only marry other Mexicans. Like, my son is Jewish. Not very Jewish, but he was born Jewish. My daughter-in-law is Mexican. What do you think my granddaughter is? She's only 6. What does she know? Does she think of herself as Jewish or Mexican? Maybe she will, maybe she won't when she gets to be an adult. Will she select her marital partner based on their ethnicity? My son didn't. My daughter-in-law didn't. The basis for their marriage was not religion. And I don't think my daughter-in-law is a good Catholic. I don't think she ever goes to church. I don't think my granddaughter ever goes to church. For her mother, being Catholic is very important.
Well, so this is the broadest question on the planet, I guess. Here, what is a Jew to you in 2010? What does that mean anymore?
It means that you have a Jewish heritage, period. Like I'm a New Yorker. I came from New York. Does anybody doubt that? People have attitudes towards me because I'm from New York. And most of those attitudes turn out to be true because I am the stereotype of a New York Jew.
There's been a lot of, maybe not so, in the 90s, there was a lot of discussion in the Jewish community about intermarriage is being another Holocaust. I mean, what was your take on, what's your take on all that?
Because if being Jewish is so important and perpetuating the people, you have to marry somebody who's Jewish. If the Jews just marry indiscriminately, you'll have fewer and fewer Jews. Most people who intermarry tend toward the norm. If an American and a Mexican marry, do they become Mexican? You know, what are the children like? I was listening to NPR this week, and there were questions. There had one guy, I couldn't even pronounce his name. He's obviously from the Middle East, and another guy who was Indian, and I couldn't pronounce his name. If they were on the radio, I could not tell they were not American. They spoke beautiful English. They were obviously born here to ethnic families. And now they're on the Jim Lehrer show delivering the news. They look like everybody else. They sound like everybody else. They're no longer ethnic. I mean, they may be in their hearts. They may be in their associations ethnic. What do you think their children are going to be like?
Let me ask you this, and I've asked a few people this issue about, it's sort of about Chabad, but it's a bigger issue than that. In our society, American ideals are tolerance, multiculturalism, diversity, all that stuff. Yet there are groups within the culture, like Chabad, and Muslim groups, there's Christian groups, who reject all those values by definition. They reject. They don't want anything. It's a paradox of some sort. Do you have any opinion on that, or
Most people are ethnocentric. We have always had the rhetoric of tolerance, but people have not been accepted until they were like everybody else. In the 19th century, I mean, the Irish were despised. I mean, to associate with the Irish, they were the dregs of society. You wouldn't associate with the Irish. The Irish are part of the American culture. The Irish, you know, you may sing some folk songs or have some food that is Irish, but what's Irish about the Irish nowadays? They're Americans. They have Irish names. But what else is there? I mean, do you feel Irish?